our courage to face the wolves, to face the enemy, it always flows from the confidence we have in the care of God. If you do not have confidence that God is caring for you, then you will always try to care for yourself. You will always try to take control rather than giving up control and surrendering to the Lord. Matthew has changed our perspective of what it looks like to be holy. That's really what it's done. Because so oftentimes we could get caught in this rut of religion. Have you noticed that? It's so easy to slip into that. It's so easy because as followers of Christ, we have been grown up in the church maybe. We have read our word many times. We've had pastors preach at us so many services. We've been to Bible studies. We've heard all of these words, and it starts to turn into something that we do, but we don't understand why we do what we do. And Jesus has wanted to drive home the understanding of the why. Why do we serve the Lord? Why do we want to desire to walk in kindness and love and display grace? Why? And all over the place in Matthew, what I love about Matthew is Matthew wants to hone in onto the divinity of Jesus. Have you noticed that? He wants to make sure that we understand that Jesus is absolutely the promised Messiah, right? That he is the Messiah, that he's not just some prophet, some guy, some dude, but he is the fulfillment of the prophecies of old. What we found out is Jesus comes off of the mount after he taught the best sermon ever, chapters 8 and chapters 9. He doesn't just teach a sermon, he comes off of the mountain and also does what he said. He doesn't just preach it, he lives it. We found out in chapters 8 and chapters 9, Jesus heals like crazy. The big theme that we've been talking about throughout all of Matthew is that Jesus absolutely came to heal. Hey, we have one person in the room. Jesus came to. Now we have 4 people in the room. Okay, let's try it again. Jesus came to. Now there's maybe 7, maybe, I don't know. But Jesus absolutely came to heal. He did. We see it through the miracles that it was displaying something more though. And that's oftentimes how Jesus works, right? When he talks in parables, when he talks in all of these different ways, what he's doing is showing us a deeper understanding, a bigger revelation. But he's using layman's terms for us to understand, to sit with. But what Jesus wanted to show us as he healed people, the lepers that no one would touch, that he would heal the blind and heal the sick and raise the dead to life, what he is wanting to show us is that in the kingdom of God that there is healing, but also that true healing comes from what Jesus is going to do on the cross. How? Because that blood is going to cover our impurities and we are going to be declared righteous. We ourselves are not righteous in and of ourselves. The Bible tells us that we are desperately wicked, evil. And if you've sat with yourself for even 1 hour, you know your mind likes to wander. Your hands like to wander. Your feet go where you don't want to go. You think just like Paul. My goodness, I wish I would do what I want to do, but dang it, I keep doing what I don't want to do. We're in a battle, in a war. But if we've confessed with our lips, we'll talk about that and believed. There's something there. I think oftentimes within church, have you noticed that we want to have a Jesus confession party? But we stop there. Confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord. But we forget the last part, that we also need to believe. And to believe in Jesus isn't just to believe that he's real. It's to put all that you have in one basket. That you understand everything in your life is wrapped up in the belief that you have of Jesus Christ. Because without Jesus Christ, your life is going to inevitably end in hell. But with Jesus Christ, the life we live has just been breathed into new life. Because now we can live for eternity here on earth before we get to heaven. That we have the privilege and opportunity to live in the society of heaven, so to speak, with the mindset of heaven rather than on this earth, that we can live with purpose, value, and life right here and right now. God has given us life for today, but also life for what's to come. And we've bombed through chapter 10. We're going to try and finish up chapter 10, but what we found out is at the end of chapter 9, Jesus switches the script and says, all right, now I'm done doing miracles. Now it's your turn. It's your turn. He looks to his 12 disciples and says, you are going to do the exact same mission as I did. You're going to proclaim the good news of Jesus. You're going to teach in the synagogues. And you're going to heal and remove demons. And I want us to remember this because I think this is really important. Our ministry is not our ministry. First and foremost, it's God's ministry. We just have the privilege of being a part of the ministry that God is doing. He's invited us into that ministry. We found out that Jesus calls them and then warns them. He sends them out and he specifically says, go to Israel first. It's kind of like a warm-up. If you guys have played sports, you know before the game starts, if you play baseball, you need to throw a bunch of baseballs before you get onto the field and actually throw a baseball. Why? Because if you don't, you're going to throw it like completely left when you were meaning to go straight. Or your entire arm is going to rip off and it's just going to dangle there because you didn't warm up and it hurts. So Jesus is almost like, hey, this is a warm up for what's about to happen. You're going to go to Israel, your people, and you're going to teach the gospel. But also we understand throughout scriptures, it tells us that first the Jews will receive the Lord, and then the Gentiles. We see with Abraham that Abraham was blessed. Why? So that he could be a blessing. We find out that Israel is very interesting. You've heard me say this multiple times, but Israel is almost like a portal or a tether to heaven. Have you noticed that? That Jesus himself came through the lineage of the Israelites. That he brought his blood to cover all of us through Israel. We find out in Revelation that Jesus is going to come back again. And guess where he's coming back? Through Israel. It started the blessing within Israel, but then it permeated and went beyond. And now Gentiles too are able to partake in that. But it first started with the Jews. And what we see after that, Jesus says, you're going into wolves, my friends. You're going into a world that wants to rip you apart. And we talked about that. That they're called sheep amongst wolves. And I want you to sit and ponder that imagery for a second. Sheep are utterly dependent upon their shepherd. They are not given sharp teeth to protect themselves. They're not given claws to claw against the enemy. Also, they need to be shaven. If they're not shaved, it gets to the point where they can't see anything, and they're so fluffy that they can't even move, and they have to do this little hop thing. But as you study sheep a little bit more, you find out that sheep are stupid, very dumb. Literally, while I was studying sheep, I just watched video after video after video after video of sheep just walking off of a cliff. Like, ah! A sheep just running full blast into a car, backing up, looking, shaking it off, and then running back into a car. I'm like, yeah, I can relate to that. They need help. But I thought it was interesting that Jesus also told us that we're going amongst wolves. And it's important. How do wolves fight? They're strategic. Have you noticed that? Wolves are very strategic. They're not a lone wolf. They are in a pack. And this pack deciphers a plan on how to attack their prey. And I think so oftentimes what happens with Christians is they do not understand that there is a plan being formulated against them, and they think that they can just walk blindly without understanding that there are absolutely traps in front of them. What Jesus is telling us is absolutely you need to be discerning like a serpent, but pure as a dove. It goes hand in hand. It's a dichotomy almost, a contrast. Think about that. This contrast of like a serpent and a dove. A dove is gentle, kind. A serpent, throughout scriptures, is usually not very good. The Jews would think of a serpent and they would understand that he was wise, scheming, discerning. And in the same way, if we have an enemy, we need to understand the traps of our enemy so that we can discern in how to walk purely. They go hand in hand. And he tells them that they're to be like this, to take no gold, no nothing, and to trust. Has God put you in a season before where you didn't have riches, where you didn't have a house, where you were barely scraping by? And oftentimes we get in this idea that we think we must be doing something wrong because we're just scraping by, because we have allowed ourselves to believe in this prosperity gospel, that Jesus is supposed to bless us always, but we don't remember that we're a child of God. And I want you to picture this. A child that is not disciplined is a child that's a terror. A child that is raised with love, but also raised with discipline, is a child that will do great and mighty things. In the same way, God takes away and he gives. And if we understand that we are able to trust the Lord, even when we have nothing, that it's going to be all the more crazy when God shows up. We're going to have all the reason to worship, to praise, to dance, to get excited, to throw a party. Let's get started. Matthew chapter 10. We're going to be in verse 26. Jesus just gets done telling them, you're going to be hated. Nobody's going to like you. Dust your feet off. We talked about that as well. And they're going to hate you because I'm the teacher, you're my servant. Guess what? If they hate me and call me Beelzebub, they're also going to hate those who are in the house of me. So we have this prepped and set up. This is also to foreshadow what's to come in the end of Matthew. When at the end of Matthew, the Great Commission. Now we're all called to go start in our home and go beyond. But to start at our home and then go beyond. In verse 26, let's read Matthew chapter 10, verse 26. So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, say in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetops. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the Father. But even the hairs on your head are all numbered. Verse 31, fear not, therefore. You are more value than many sparrows. So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I also will deny before my Father who is in heaven. We're going to have to talk about that last part because sometimes people get a little scared with that word deny. We'll get there in a second. But I want you to understand something. The big message that Jesus is wanting to communicate here. There's one big message. And this message is that our courage flows from the confidence of God's care. Let me repeat that one more time. Our courage to face the wolves, to face the enemy, to face what is coming against us. Friends, there are absolutely forces coming against you. You live in a world that is fallen. You live in a world that is being ran by our enemy, that the devil himself walks upon the earth. We need to get that. But if you desire courage to face that, it always flows from the confidence we have in the care of God. If you do not have confidence that God is caring for you, then you will always try to care for yourself. You will always try to take control rather than giving up control and surrendering, as Zion so beautifully sung, to the Lord. We need to start there, and that is what Jesus is wanting to show us. That our faith, and it's interesting, have you noticed when you take a step of faith, how you feel so small at first? Think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego like we talked about last week. They were the only ones that stood tall. There's this gigantic gold image right before them. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people all around them. All of the instruments start to blow. It's a big scene. And all of a sudden, everybody drops to their knees to worship this false image. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, what do? They stand tall. Can you imagine? Yeah, they were confident, but let's be real. There was still probably some shaking knees because they realized what was happening. When we take a bold step of faith, how often do we feel so small and vulnerable? But I want you to remember that it will stand in the light. Our feeling of small faith will absolutely stand in the light. It will stand tall when everybody else will have to bow. Because we were able to stand for the Lord. It's interesting we see here, to have no fear of them, that Jesus has to say that. Why? Well, because that shows us that Jesus understands that there will be fear that we will have. I want you to understand something. Fear is human nature. Have you noticed that? To have fear is human nature. We've talked about this as well, that there are two separations of fear, though. There is an unhealthy fear, and that there is a healthy fear. We've talked about this before. If you were to go up against a cliff, you went to the Grand Canyon, and you look down, and the rock slips underneath you, there will be a good fear. The fear would be jump back really quickly. Before you go, and kerplunk. That's a good fear. Why? Because that fear just pushed you back on to the path of life. When we see the word fear God, it's in the same way. That we understand when we're walking in a way that is contrary to God, there will be a prick in our heart from the conviction of the Holy Spirit, and we will understand that God is righteous, and how we are walking out of unrighteousness will be judged. What's beautiful is the judgment that's going to be faced has already been paid for. But we also understand that we desire to be on the path of life rather than the path of death. And with that, Jesus starts it off with, hey, do not fear. Do not fear those who can kill your body. And what's hard is if we're focused on our body, if we're focused on the things here on earth, we will always be fearful of what they could do to our body. If we're focused on how to make all the income we can have, all the cars we can get, the big homes that we can get, the achievements we can achieve, if we are always focused on those things and forget about our heaven mind, then we will always be in fear of what they can do of our body. And what Jesus wants to do is to show us something. He wants to redefine the definition of death. That's what he's doing. Instead of dying in your physical body, do you understand that that's not death? Do you want to know what true death is? A spiritual death. And what Jesus is showing us is that physical death is not the end. Friends, I understand that the life we live, that the privilege we have with the people we're married to, the friends that we have, the things that we've obtained, all of this is great. It's good. That God has blessed us with all of this. But I need you to understand something, that what's to come is so much better. My question is, do you believe that? And if you understand what's to come is so much better, that you will live this life with an understanding that come what may, I know that I am cared for by my Father, and if I am to lose this life, if I am to be harmed in this life, I know that it will be a privilege and an opportunity, because we've talked about this, our persecution becomes a platform to be revealed to the community around us. But also, we understand that this life filled with pain, hurt, and suffering will come to an end, and we will be face to face with Jesus. The reason all of us long for more, we all have a longing in our hearts. We want more. Why? Because there's more to come, and there's only one who can fulfill that longing within us. You see there, to fear God who can kill both the body and the soul, not those who only kill the body. He says, I want you to proclaim this on the rooftops, the housetops. This was actually an idiom that the Jews would use. Sometimes, I've heard people, we need to go preach on rooftops. So people, take it very literal. And they go up onto rooftops. They get boom boxes and speakers, and they're on their house yeah, you need to hear about God, y'all. You need to hear about God. That's cool. That's wonderful. It's awesome. What would happen in the Jewish culture is they had homes that had flat roofs. We talked about this, right? On the side of these houses, the Galilean houses, they would actually have staircases that would go up. On top of this roof, we've talked about this with the hay and all the stubble, they would mix it with mud or clay. It would harden and create a seal on the roof. What would happen oftentimes is people would make a declaration or an announcement that they wanted to communicate on top of their roof. They were trying to tell all their neighbors, yo, your parties are going way too late. My baby is trying to sleep. Stop. That's basically what they were doing. So when it's said to go on top of rooftops and proclaim, really what it's saying is just to make this known. Spread it. It doesn't need to just be on a rooftop. It could be at Albertsons or Costco. Or maybe you're getting gas and someone is helping you out. Thank you so much. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to talk, to communicate, to spread the good news, to proclaim the light of Jesus. But it's interesting, I see this passage in verse 29, and Jesus brings up sparrows. And he says, aren't 2 sparrows sold for a penny? This penny is an Assyrian, which is 1/16 of a denarius. A denarius is a day's wage, and 1/16 of a day's wage. So it's very small. Some scholars say that it's the smallest coin of the Roman Empire. It was very small. So what it's showing us is that you could get 2 sparrows for a single penny. It's showing us that these sparrows are really of no worth. You see, even the poor, they would use sparrows as food. That was all they could afford, really. So they would eat sparrows. You would also see the poor that they weren't able to offer up the correct sacrifice, so they were given the privilege, the opportunity to buy a sparrow and to offer it as a sacrifice. That this sparrow seems to have really no value. Luke goes a little bit further with it. It's funny to me. Luke has like a buy 4, get 1 free discount type of thing on a sparrow. Luke in chapter 12, he says, are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? So we just found out that you could get 2 sparrows for 1 penny. And then if you give them 2 pennies, it's a buy 4, get 1 type of deal. Like they're so cheap that everybody's like, dude, you can just have it. Just go ahead. Just take that 5th one. It's going to be wonderful. But it's showing us something. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? Pause there for a second. What he's doing here is he's shocking his crowd. Jesus loved doing that. Have you noticed, like when Jesus talked, he was like awe and shock. People were often really offended by Jesus. When he spoke, it just had an edge to it. And when he says this, are not these 2 sparrows that are just so insignificant? These sparrows that you look down upon and only the poor buy them. These inexpensive little things. I know each and every single one of them. And I just love this. Because God's care is absolutely cosmic, but it's also intimately personal. That God cares even for this insignificant sparrow. That he is able to see that sparrow, to love that sparrow, and that it will not fall to the ground apart from our Father, which is an interesting way of saying his divine providence. And I love it that God is not a God that is distant. Our God did not just put things into creation and be done with it. That he is still a part of his creation. That he is still working within his creation. And I love it. It goes right after that and says, hey, those sparrows that are insignificant, I see them. But guess what? How much more value are you? I don't know if you're like me, but I have been in seasons where I feel like a sparrow. Insignificant. I've been in seasons where I feel like I have no value, no purpose, no worth. I feel like people don't want to be my friend. People don't want to hear what I have to say. Sometimes I feel like I'm just a waste of space. I don't know if you've been in that place. And what I love is that God goes so into detail, that he shows us even the minute, little, insignificant things that we think God sees. But not only that, he gives us value and worth here. He says, you are so much more worth those sparrows. That I see even the hair on your head. What God is wanting to reveal to us, that his care is very, very intimate. That God's care is detailed. And so oftentimes when we walk this life, we forget that God is a God of detail. We think that we've walked out of order, we're out of bounds, or God's maybe not in this, or God's not working. But guess what? God has details about you, about what's happening. And if we understand that, true courage will be settled within us. That even the hairs on our head, even the insignificant places that we feel, Even the areas where we feel like we're not good enough, God still sees us, God still loves us, and God still is fighting and caring on our behalf. We have work to do, absolutely. But let's be real, we're not able to do that work apart from God. God is definitely working with us and intimately involved in every little thing. He looks to them and says, how much more do I care about you? You, my image bearers. You have a special privilege, friends. You do. You get to bear the image of God. That his breath was breathed into you. I love that Genesis tells us that God breathed all up into Adam's nostrils. That just sounds weird. Just breathed into his nose. But the breath of God lives within you. And that God cares intimately for you. And if you can trust that, there will be courage. He is the anchor. And he anchors our security not in circumstances, but in the Father's attentive care. Can you remember that? Do you remember the time when you were a child? And I was just thinking about this with my parents here. I remember there was a time where they said that they were struggling financially. I'm going to be real with you. I had no idea. Every day, I still had food on my plate. I still had an Xbox that I was playing Guitar Hero very loudly on. I still went to school, hung out with my friends. My parents were a little stressed at that time. But I didn't really feel it. I was kind of separated from it. And even though the circumstances around our family was vulnerable, I had the privilege of feeling peace under the protection of my parents. And in the same way, I want you to understand something. Yes, there might be vulnerable situations around you, but you need to understand that you can trust the care of God. That you absolutely can trust his care. And I love it. Jesus goes on and he says they're going to hate you. And you don't need to fear. You can trust that you have worth. And this statement that he's communicating here is a declaration of identity in the face of rejection. Have you noticed when we're rejected, we struggle with our identity? Have you noticed that? I just want to be liked. I want to be loved. I want to be cared for. I want to have friends. I want to be a part of things. And when we're rejected, oftentimes we lose our image, our identity. And what Jesus is wanting to show us is that your identity in the face of rejection is not based upon those who rejected you. The world may hurt you, devalue you. The family even might turn against you, as we read last week. The courts might condemn you, but your worth and your identity is not assigned by men. It is secured by your Maker. What he's showing us is in the face of rejection, you still have an identity that is attached to your Father and how your Father will continue to care for you. Going back to the analogy of me being under my parents, my identity was a part of my parents. We have the same last name. I even look kind of like my mom. I'm attached to their identity. And because of that identity, I had protection. I had peace. This word acknowledge here means to confess or affirm your allegiance. You could see that in verse 32. Everyone who acknowledges me before men, I will acknowledge before the Lord. This phrasing is really interesting. This is covenantal language. This is a language that God is communicating that is making a covenant, a promise. How many of you know that when God promises something, that he means it? Not only does he mean it, that he holds value to that promise, so much so that he will carry that promise to the ends of the age. The promise is, if you confess me, if you confess Jesus before people, he will confess you before the Lord. And so oftentimes I hear this from Christians, oh, well, I have an intimate personal relationship with God. I don't show it to other people. And I think that's stupid and very dumb. It is. Because all over just think about some of the things that Jesus left us, okay? Jesus left us baptism. Why? Well, so that we could be baptized in front of people so that they could see what has happened within. He has outward things to show inward things. We've talked about this before. Joshua crossing the Jordan. God tells him to get stones and put them in the middle of the river. The river floods. You can't see those stones anymore. So he says also put more stones at Gilgal so you can see the unseen. And in the same way, if we have a personal, intimate relationship with God, guess what's going to happen? It has to come out. If you're married and you're trying not to let people know you're married, but there's that intimate, personal relationship when no one's looking, that's a recipe for disaster. It is. When you're married, there's a personal, intimate relationship, but you also boldly expose it to everyone. Someone comes up to you and flirts with you. You say, heck no, I'm married. Back off. I liked it, so I put a ring on it. And in the same way, we absolutely need to confess the Lord publicly. Let it take over everything we are. This word deny, I've actually had some conversations with some Christians about this, and they're like, dude, I've denied Christ like 100 times. I've done stupid things, and I totally knew what he wanted, and I denied it and just went and did it anyways. And maybe you're in the room and you're like, yeah? Okay. And this word choice is interesting, deny, because we need to understand the character of God. We also need to understand the reference and what's happening here. Think about this. Did Peter deny God? Was Peter saved? Okay, so there's a denial that's happening, but there's something interesting here. This deny isn't just a momentary denial like Peter. What did Peter do? He confessed, repented, and he was forgiven by Jesus on the beach. He struggled. In a moment of being scared, he's seeing Jesus get destroyed. And he's like, heck no, I don't want to be a part of that. I understand. What this deny is referencing is a willful rejection, a habitual, deliberate disowning of Jesus in public life. And there are people that are habitually denying God. They've said it in their heart that they do not believe that Jesus is Christ. Let's finish it with this last passage and let's bomb through it. Do not think that I have come to bring peace on the earth. I have come to bring a sword, or not to bring peace, but to bring a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, oh my goodness, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a person's enemies will be those of his own household. My goodness. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life will, for my sake, will find it. Verse 40. Whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. The one who receives the prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and the one who receives a righteous person, because he is a righteous person, will receive a righteous person's reward. Verse 42. And whoever gives one of these little ones even a cup of water Because he is a disciple, truly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. Okay, let's start with this. I actually titled my sermon, A Gospel That Divides. The reason being is right away we see that Jesus didn't come to bring peace on earth. We thought he did. Wait a second. And I think it's so interesting. Oftentimes where we could settle with, like, hey, if we're in the Lord, we're united, right? We're united. There's a peace. But I also need you to understand where the gospel's preached, there's a response that is demanded. Where the gospel's heard, they now have the truth. They have to make a decision with that truth. And the gospel absolutely is like a sword. What Jesus is saying is to not get a sword and then start preaching the gospel and hacking people to pieces with it. No. Some people can read into this and be like, oh, we need to be violent for Jesus. No. This sword is a metaphor, and it represents division. It's a divisive thing. And I need you to think about that. Have you been able to talk to someone that is so against the Lord that they turn on you? All of a sudden, you are public enemy number one. And all you said was, Jesus loves you. And all of a sudden, they hate you. They're scheming against you. They're mad at you, yelling at you in front of everyone, getting ready to punch you. You're like, whoa, that escalated. And I need you to understand something, that when we preach the gospel, it will be divisive even in families. And I've seen this as well. Poor children seeking after God, giving their life to the Lord, and then they come home to a wicked, evil home. I've had many years of preaching the youth, and I've heard this story time in and time out, so much so that the parents begin to mock and humiliate their child because they think their child is blinded. And it makes me so sad that even the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, the love we have for Christ will be something that will divide maybe even our family, the closest ones to us. The Jews in the room would be crazy shocked. The culture of the time, you were very tight-knit with your family. You desired to honor, to respect, and to uphold the family name and image. For you to do anything that would disown you from your family was a disgrace. But not only a disgrace to your family, it would be a disgrace to them in the synagogue, in the temple, before God. This was a high thing for Jesus to say, and every Jew would be offended at this moment when Jesus is preaching this. And what happens is, like, Jesus says something radical here. He says in verse 37, whoever loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves their son or daughters more is not worthy of me. And some people can get a little twisted with this. They're like, well, I should hate my parents. Sorry, Mom, Dad, I hate you. like, you know what I mean? Like, people read that, and they're like, oh, we need to hate everyone. No, because Jesus also told us the two greatest commandments, love God and love your fellow people. Okay, so love should be prominent. So what is Jesus saying? Jesus isn't asking them to not love them. What he's asking them is to order your loves. To order them. Sometimes we need to make a list of the loves that we have and put them in order and ask ourselves, is that the real order? Because naturally, as a good follower of Christ, we want to put Jesus up there. But lately, golf has been life. And we need to order our loves. Jeremy said it this morning, we just want to seek your kingdom first. What's first? Jesus isn't saying hate. But in comparison to the love you have for Jesus, it almost looks like hate. If you're married, think about that. With your spouse, you show all of your love. We've talked about that, the phileo, agape, and the other one, erotica love. Your spouse gets all of you, all of that love. No one else gets that. That's icky. So compared to the love that your spouse gets, your friends get kind of second love, you know? And in the same way, we're called to love God so intimately that he is always on the forefront of our brain and on top of the list of our loves. Anything that competes for the love of Jesus has become an idol to us, even good things, friends. Even good things like family. That first and foremost, we see Matthew for the very first time mention the cross. This is the first time Matthew mentions it. And when we think of a cross, we think of really cute jewelry. Have you noticed that? I got earrings with a cross on it. I got a cool necklace with a cross on it. I got a Jesus shirt, has a cross. It's super rad. Everywhere I go, people see my cross and they know I am a Jesus freak, you know? That's how we identify as a cross. At this time, that was not what was seen with a cross. When Jesus says, pick up your cross, this is like next level. Because this is a Roman torture that Romans perfected. What that means is they didn't just let's try and hang a guy. No, they schemed and plotted. How can we cause so much pain that this isn't just an easy death, that they are in turmoil and weeping and just a stretching of their body where they suffocate so much that they're gagging on air. They tried to plot how they could get this to be a torture device. It wasn't just death, it was torture. Jesus says, pick it up. They were also shamed on the cross, stripped of everything, naked and exposed. What Jesus is saying is we need to carry shame, suffering, and they had to surrender. They had to realize they were dead. And in the same way, as a follower of Christ, we need to do the same thing, that we are going to be shamed for the gospel, that we are going to go through hard things, but we are called to suffer well. But at the same time, we need to surrender to the death of our ego. We need to die to ourselves. And in the beginning of life, it started with death. When we die to ourselves, that's the paradox of the kingdom of God. Real life begins when your old life dies. You can't follow Jesus and stay in control. The last part, I'm wrapping it up here. Jesus says, whoever receives me and whoever receives him will receive also the one who sent him. This is interesting because this is like a chain of mission, if you're noticing. First and foremost, the Father sent the Son. Whose mission was it? Well, it was the Father giving the Son the mission. And then the Son gave his disciples the mission. And then the disciples gave more disciples the mission, and so on. Now, this mission, first and foremost, is from God himself. But this whole passage would speak to the Jewish world as well. The reason being is what they would see is, and I think we have this twisted a little bit in our culture now, and I want to encourage all of us in this, that we should be more like the Jews in this area than the Western culture that we've been raised in. But hospitality in the first century Jewish world was seen as a righteous behavior. That when you were hospitable to someone, you were doing a righteous deed for the Lord. That was an act of love being displayed through you, and it was God's love being shown to them. And in the same way, we yes, there's the gift of hospitality. But you can look throughout all of Scripture. It almost also seems like as a follower of Christ, we are supposed to be hospitable people. That we are supposed to be welcoming, genuine, loving, set up the scene so that we can have this intimacy in the room. But what we see here is Jesus sees it as a righteous behavior. The Jewish see it as a righteous behavior, but he upgrades it almost. It's almost this representational theology that where we represent Jesus and Jesus represents the Father and so on and so on and so on. And it's almost like that his followers carry Jesus' presence. We carry his presence. And then if they honor us who are carrying his presence and speaking the gospel, guess what? They get to receive in the reward. Did you know this? That when we actually help ministries, when we help maybe speakers or pastors or just all over the world, different ministries that are helping people in third world countries, feeding them, protecting them, bringing them out of a hostile environment, creating refugees and refugee camps. When we support people that are doing the work of God, did you understand that maybe you're not able to go there? Maybe you're not able to be on the front line. Maybe your health hasn't been up to par and you're not able to hit the streets every single day. But if you're able to honor and to help or to receive or to give to those who are doing the work of God, that the Bible tells us here that you actually receive a payment of the righteous reward that that person is earning. And so oftentimes we think that we need to be the one doing something. If God's calling you to do it, do it. Let's go. But maybe God's calling you to gather around someone, some ministry, and for you to get on your knees and pray for those people, to give your finances to those people, to ask, how else can I help? What can I do to be a part of this mission? And how are we strong as followers of the Lord? Is when we are united together. When we understand maybe there's a leader of the mission, but if we are able to partake in that mission with them, we are furthering the gospel, but we're also earning a great reward in heaven. How fun is that? How exciting is that? There are no small parts in the mission of God, only unseen rewards. The rewards will be seen soon. And friends, let's do our part. Let's have fun when we enjoy the fact that we get to suffer and suffer well. That we get to do hard things, even impossible things for the Lord. That God works within us, and so much so that he cares intimately for us. I want to end it with that, friends. That your God cares for you in great detail. That he's called you to this wonderful mission of his. That you don't have to worry about where you're going to live or what job you're going to get. You don't have to worry about how you're going to do this or that. Because you understand that courage comes from understanding God's care.